Lesson 25. The instructions for Lesson 25 say use the pictorial notation to solve. And you probably can hear the word part picture in pictorial, which means drawing. So what they want you to do is they want you to draw out, like they do sometimes, using these little things that look like chocolate chips, I think, and squares with numbers in them to represent the blocks. So I'll do a couple of these as an example. You might ask your teacher if they want you to do all of these with drawing or a couple of them, or if you don't have to. It kind of depends teacher to teacher. So we know that this symbol represents a white pawn and this symbol represents a blue pawn. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, and then one more. I'm going to write the number 5 and put a box around it because I always box my numbers to differentiate them from the variables in the problem. Over here I did get a red pen to write my negative numbers in red. And then I have a blue pawn here. I know it's blue because it doesn't have the little line through it. And over here I'm just going to remind myself that these are the blue pawns, these are the white pawns for the columns. So in algebra you always want to try and get all of the variables on one side, numbers on the other. And my method is to start and look and see which side has the least number of pawns, and it's the right hand side. And so if we had our manipulatives out, we would pull that down. Because I don't have manipulatives, I'm going to shade that in lightly. Lightly just to represent that it's not there anymore, but light enough that if I made a mistake and I need to go back and redo it, I can just erase that and it pretty much shows up again. So just lightly cross it out. And if I pull down or cross out a blue pawn on this side, I have to do the same thing on the other side. But I don't have a blue pawn over there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use my strategy of adding a 0 pair, and that means that I have to, a pair means 2. So I have to add a white and a blue pawn on the left hand side. So now I can cross out or pull down that pawn, cross it out a little bit, and now I have 4 white pawns and a 5 block, and on the other side I have a negative 15. So it would really be nice if I didn't have that 5 there. So I'm going to pull that 5 down because then I've just got pawns on the left and numbers on the right. But if I pull it down on the left, I have to pull one down on the right, and I don't have a green or just a regular 5. So I'm going to add a 0 pair again, and it's going to be a green 5 or just a regular 5 and a negative 5. So now I have a 5 block I can pull down. So I'm going to lightly shade it in. And then I'm just left with numbers on the right and pawns on the left. And that's what I like when I solve an algebra problem. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 white pawns over here. And I have negative 15 plus a negative 5 is negative 20. So this quantity together, these two blocks, are negative 20. 4 times what gives me negative 20? Well, that would be negative 5. So my white pawns must be negative 5, which means that my blue pawns are going to be the opposite. They're going to be 5. To do my check, I move everything back up, which means that I'm not going to have them grayed out anymore. But this is still 0. This value right here is still 0 because 5, which is what this pawn is, and this one, -5, sum or add to make 0. So I actually can make my check a little bit simpler by just taking that 0 pair off. And I can take this 0 pair off as well. I'm going to cross those out really dark so I can't even see them anymore. And then I'm just left with 3 white pawns, which are -5. So this is -5 plus -5 plus -5, which is -15, plus a +5. So that +5 and the -15 gives me a -10. Over here, I have -15 and +5, which is -10. You might also notice here that because this white pawn is equal to -5, that these two together make a 0 pair. Only because this value I've already discovered is -5. So that would leave me with -5, -10. And over here I have -15 plus 5, which is -10. So either way you want to do the math on this side, you still get a check of -10 equals -10. Okay, I'm going to come down and I'm going to do this number 4 because it has parentheses. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change this subtraction to an addition, which makes this a negative. And remember, anytime you have a negative number outside of parentheses, when you're going to be multiplying that negative number by the values that are inside, these values are going to have the opposite sign when they come out of the parentheses. So let's see how that looks. Remember, there's a little invisible 1 here. So -2 times -1x, a negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 1x is 2x. So this becomes a positive 2x. A -2 times a positive 4, it's going to change the sign. It's not going to be positive anymore, it's going to be negative, and 2 times 4 is 8. So this becomes a -8. Now, I still have my 2x's here, and on the other side, I still have an x and a -2. So I'm going to draw that in with my red pen. Okay, I should have drawn this in with my red pen. I'll go ahead and do that. Now, for the other part of the drawing, this is 2 blue pawns and 2 more blue pawns, and I have my 8 block. Go ahead and draw my 2 block in over here, and on this side I have a blue pawn. So the good news is I'm only dealing with 1 color of pawn and 1 color of block. So let's get all of our x's, our blue pawns on one side. So let's shade out a blue pawn over here and a blue pawn over here, which means that I pulled them down. And now I would also like to pull down this 8 because I only want pawns on this side. So if I pull down an 8 here, I need to pull down an 8 here. I don't have an 8 over here, so I'm going to add an 8 block and a regular positive 8. So now I have an 8 block to pull down. Oops, shade it in. So now I'm left with 1, 2, 3 pawns on one side is equal to, that one got pulled down, this one got pulled down, a -2 plus 8. Well, that value is 6. and it's a positive 6. Positive 8 plus negative 2 is positive 6. So each one of these must have a value of 3 times what gives me positive 6? Well, that would be 2. 2, 4, 6. So each blue pawn is a positive 2, and each white pawn is a negative 2. So what is my check? Well, to do my check, I move everything back up. So this one comes back, this comes back, this comes back, but these two together make 0, so I can take them away. And I don't have any 0 pairs over here, so I just have to substitute in. Each of these is a 2, so 2, 4, 6, 8. This is positive 8. Positive 8 and a negative 8 make 0. Over on this side, I bring this pawn back up, and I have a 2 plus a negative 2 is 0. 0 does equal 0. So that is your check for this one. You would do the other ones the same way by drawing. That's what pictorial notation means. Now, the last assignment you have is, it says optional lesson up here, so you'll have to ask Ms. Molly if you need to do this one. And it says use the pictorial and written notation to solve. So pictorial, you just learned, means draw them out, and it says written notation. So you'll need to visit with Ms. Molly about how she wants you to write what she wants you to do. But now you know how to use the pictorial notation. So you would draw 5 blue pawns here, and you would draw a 3 block is equal to 2 blue pawns and 15. And remember, we can represent 15 as the sum of 2 blocks, 2 numbers. So it looks like I'd probably want to get rid of that 3 over there. So I think because I am writing this, I'm going to use a 3 block, and I'm going to use a 12 block, even though in my blocks I really don't have 12s, but I get to draw this. So now when I do this, I'm going to take away these 2 on this side and these 2 on this side, so that I'm left with 3 blue pawns on this side. And now I'm going to pull down my 3 block, and I'm going to pull down my 3 block, and I see that I'm left with 3 blue pawns are equal to 12. And what would each of those be? 3 times what gives you 12? Well, that would be 4. So your X would be 4. And then you would move all these back up to do your check, which means you kind of want them to not be gray anymore. And then see what you have when you put 4 back in for the blue pawns. And of course this would have to be a 3, so that you would have 15. So when you put 4 back in, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23. So I have 23 on the left, and let's see what I have on the right. I have 4 and 4, so this quantity is 8. And 8 plus 3 is 11, and 11 plus 12 is 23. So this one would be 23 equals 23. If I were going to have to do some pictorial methods on this sheet, I would choose the easiest problems there are to draw out. But that's just me. You can visit with your teacher about that and see what she thinks.